We have a panel that's going to really dive deep into our theme about advocating for your breast health year-round. We all know that October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and obviously a lot of the coverage we've been doing this month has been focused on telling stories of innovation, all the news and incredible breakthroughs that are happening when it comes to breast cancer research. But the experts that we have here tonight are really going to get personal, and they're going to share kind of a toolkit for what everyone in this room needs to know about prioritizing their breast health, not just in October, but all year long. So please welcome to the stage Dr. Kathie-Ann Joseph, Trish Michelle, and Kristen Klasey. Thank you and welcome. We're going to get to my questions in just a minute, and at the end of this, we will be opening up to audience Q&A, so if you have any questions throughout the conversation, you will get a chance to pose them to our experts. But I'd like to start by asking each of you just to introduce yourselves and share a little bit about the work that you're doing in relation to breast cancer, and Dr. Joseph, we'll start with you.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Dr. Kathie-Ann Joseph. I am a breast surgeon, professor of surgery and population health at NYU Langone Health.
Trish.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Trish Michelle from Queens, New York. I'm the Chief Community Officer for the Breasties. Woo! They've been paid handsomely, as you can see. And we're on a mission to support and improve the experiences for those impacted by breast and GYN cancer by peer-to-peer support and connection. And so I'm really excited to be here. And I'm an 8-year breast cancer survivor.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kristen Klasey. I am Director of Breast Cancer and Women's Health Marketing Strategy at Novartis. It's a privilege to be here. I'm excited to talk to you all today and share a little bit about what we're doing.
Thank you. So each of our panelists has a very unique POV when it comes to breast cancer, and we're going to be diving into their individual areas of expertise. But I'd like to start with a question that I would want each of you to answer, which is quite simply, what is one misperception that you think has persisted for too long about breast cancer, and that if you had like a magic wand, it's Halloween tomorrow, and could just make it disappear, what would that be? Kristen?
I think we heard it today, and it's, well, if I don't have a family history, I don't have a sister, a mother, a grandmother, therefore I'm immune to breast cancer, it can't happen to me. And we know that's not true. We know that 80% of cases can be from, breast cancer. That's not genetic from family, and I think that's something we have to continue to break.
Great. Trish.
All right, I'm getting fired up. I think
it's early.
I know, I'm getting started real early. I think it's the fact that when you ring the bell, I'm speaking now as a survivor, that when the bell is rung and when someone is cancer-free, that their experiences with cancer are over. And I hope that's what we can talk about. And I think it's great that it's like breast cancer is year-round, and for many of us, living in this cancer space is a lifetime. I often say that survivorship is a lifetime, and if you're lucky, you get to live a long life, but it's fraught with a lot of challenges. And so that's what I hope we can impart in today's conversation.
I can come up with a whole list, but I'm going to say, since we're in October and we're also talking about screening, that radiation from mammograms can cause breast cancer. So I often have patients that come in and they want to negotiate with me about, well, I don't want to have the mammogram. Can I have an ultrasound instead, or other things like a thermogram or thermography or other things like that instead of a mammogram for screening? And I just tell them no. I mean, that the mammogram is the test for screening. You can, if you need something else, if you're, we talk about risk and other things, but they often want to negotiate and have something else instead of it. And they're worried about the radiation, which has been overblown.
Well, thank you for clearing that up, because in general, the women's health space, as we know, is rife with misinformation, and we want to make sure that people are asking for the proper tests. And Kristen, I'm wondering if you could share with us kind of the checklist of screenings, treatments, touch points that every woman needs to just kind of commit to memory.
And it's a lot, right? I mean, if we think about it, if you even search breast cancer, how much did you find out there? How much is true? How much is, someone's opinion? There's a lot of information, and I think it's really interesting to see. I think Stacy said, 40 years. 40 years has been significant innovation. In 10 years, innovation. In the last year, so much. But that's a lot of information that all of us have to try and prioritize and get through and figure out, well, what's right for me. And so I think from checklists and screenings and things, first and foremost, have a great relationship with your doctor. Make sure that you're relying on your healthcare professional. And if you don't, find someone that is going to have a good relationship with you and make sure that you're relying on them for your care. And that's critical. I like to think of it as sort of that consumerism of health, that we deserve to have great relationships with our doctors. I think Dr. Joseph is a great example of that, and she's going to talk today about it. But make sure you're talking with your physician about your care and what's right and what's your risk level. And if you haven't done the breast cancer risk assessment tool, if you don't know about it, Google it, ask your doctor as well, and find out. I think, we have 2 organizations here today, and there's so many more, but the advocacy community is fierce, and there's just powerful information. And Breasties, I love. Susan G. Komen, I love. I've had such a crush on them for the last year, and so I'm like, oh, they're going to be
Feeling
here.
is mutual.
So excited. So excited. Go to their websites. Go and search for information. They're a great resource as well, and they're just 2 of so many that if you're looking for people who look like you or for your experience, you're going to find the organizations and the people that are out there to help you through this process. I'd say just lastly, what you all are doing and really changing the narrative around breast cancer and making it open and honest and accessible through Flow, through different medium, it's a great resource as well.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I love this idea of having a great relationship with your doctor. I wish we all felt that we did have that. I don't know, how many people feel like they have a great relationship with their doctor? Okay, all right, more than I would have thought, but still a lot of people searching for that great relationship, so make that priority 1. But the reality is, even when you can talk to your doctor, even when you have done the research and feel like, hey, something's wrong and I need help, and you ask for that help, you may still not get the care that you need. And Trish, I know that this is a big part of your story, and I'm hoping you can share it with the audience.
Absolutely. I realized that oftentimes that your relationship with your healthcare provider can be quite adversarial. I felt the lump. I'll just go back just a hair. I had a physical. Everything was great. Just take some iron and go live your life. And 2 weeks later, iron. And I felt that lump, and I knew immediately that something was off, right? And so when I went back to my doctor, I was met with, rolled eyes and sighs, kind of. I was inconvenient. I'm like, sorry, am I keeping you from something, And I had to fight for myself. I had to advocate for myself. He told me, just go live my life. Why was I hunting for trouble? Oh, yeah, that's what I said, too. I was like, there are better things I could be doing. I could be going on dates and brunch. I don't want to be here, but I had to push back and ask for a mammogram. I had to demand for that mammogram because he just kept putting roadblocks in my way, gaslighting me, making me think I didn't see what I see, I didn't feel what I felt. So it's very difficult, and so I've been advocating for myself from that moment, and it's a muscle that I'm constantly exercising because that's the resistance you feel all the time in this space.
And how did you finally get your diagnosis?
I did because, again, I told him that if he did not want to write me that mammogram, he was going to have to document it, because I learned that little hack. You can make them move by making them put it in black and white. I said I was going to find a mammogram truck in the mall somewhere. I was going to get it hell or high water. So he might as well just write it. And when he felt like, oh, she's giving me a hard time, I got the mammogram I so needed, and sure enough, it proved me right that I had stage 3 invasive ductal carcinoma. So I didn't have all the time in the world to kind of figure out if he was right or not, that I had to fight for myself immediately. It was a tough lesson, but an important one as I navigated it as a cancer survivor, that I was like, I cannot be passive here. I cannot put my life in their hands and just be, a passenger princess, let's say. I needed to if I was going to be seen as the bitch, because that's what they think sometimes anyway, that I was going to prove him right, but I was going to be alive to prove him right.
Thank you for sharing that incredibly important story. Dr. Joseph, before we're too hard on doctors, I would like
My doctor now is great, and you're great too.
We're not all like that.
you're obviously on the other
I'm on the
side
other
of
side
the
as a surgeon.
experience, and
Yeah.
I would love to hear from you how you think patients coming to see you can best advocate for themselves, or what advice or guidance can you provide to getting the care that you need?
Well, first of all, unfortunately, your experience, I see that way too often by the time the patients come to me, because I see the patients once they're already diagnosed. And I often see that in younger women who get blown off because primary care doctors think that you're young, you can't get breast cancer. And unfortunately, also in Black and brown women, they get blown off. So it does happen. And so unfortunately, when they come to me, it's been months where a woman has been complaining about something and then it's discovered. As you are a perfect example of someone who you were your own best advocate. And that is what I tell women all the time. You are your own best advocate. You know your body. You know when something is wrong. And when you reach one roadblock, you have to go around that roadblock. And you just have to advocate for yourself. If your doctor is not going to write that mammogram, you got to find another doctor or talk to someone else. Rely on your sisterhood. Someone who will help you get that mammogram, or help you see another doctor who will help you, because you can't just stop at that first roadblock.
Yeah.
So you did the right thing.
Dr. Joseph, you raised this idea of younger women coming to see you. And Kristen, when we were talking earlier before the panel, you also mentioned the growing prevalence of diagnoses of younger women. I'd like each of you, and I'll start with you, Dr. Joseph, to talk about what you're seeing and how women under 40, I believe, are the fastest growing group of new breast cancer diagnoses.
We are seeing, you can hear me, right? We are seeing women under 40, certainly women under 50, and it is a concern. I can't tell you why that is, but it is a growing segment in the demographics of women who are being diagnosed with breast cancer. I can't tell you why. And so you have to know your bodies, because obviously we are not screening women under 40. So you have to examine your breasts. And if you are going to literally follow the USPSTF guidelines, not only do they not recommend the self-breast exams, they don't even recommend a clinical breast exam. So your primary care doctor doesn't even necessarily have to even do a breast exam on you, which... Don't get me started on that. That's like a whole nother conversation.
Kristen, can you build on the idea of knowing your body and what else you should be doing, even if you think that you are not at risk?
Absolutely. And I'll say, I'm privileged to be able to speak to so many women in the role that I have, and to hear their stories. And I'd say part of the younger that needs to be part of the conversation as well is, and I love that you said it's sort of that beyond the bell. It's what else? Right, so it's breast cancer and it's life beyond, and what else is that impacting? And are we having conversations about fertility? Are we having conversations about freezing our eggs? Are we having conversations about menopause under 40? And what does that look like? Sexual health, fertility, all of these topics, and how are we bringing that as part of the conversation? You're not getting a choice in this, right? To live, you may have to go through these, but how are we making sure that we're having an open, honest conversation, and especially when there are younger women, so that they are primed and they have the right information to make that decision with their physician on what treatment options are best for them.
Great. Trish, earlier you mentioned this idea of survivorship. And I would love if you could build on it, because of course the way that stories are traditionally told when it comes to breast cancer is this incredible celebratory moment at the end of treatment. You have survived something terrible, and it deserves to be celebrated, and it's such a joyous, joyous experience. What happens the next day?
Well, I liken it to when the fair comes to town, right? And then it's just that big parade at the end, and there's such fanfare. And then what happens the next day? You wake up and you're like, oh, there's shit everywhere and confetti on the floor. And I'm sorry, I got permission to be spicy. But it's really true. And what it does is that it invalidates the experience of the person that has rung this bell. Because when you do have things that come up like early menopause, joint pains, depression, because everyone's telling you you should be grateful. So what do you do with all these feelings when the world is telling you you shouldn't have them, that you should be leaning in gratitude? It spirals you, right? And everyone, why don't you turn the page? Why aren't you grateful? It's debilitating, and you have no space to feel those feelings. And so more conversations need to be had about that so that we are primed for a lifetime of survivorship.
I remember interviewing a breast cancer survivor who was having a lot of sexual dysfunction after her treatment was completed, and her doctor's response was essentially, "What else do you want? I saved your life." And it's just so dismissive of what
Absolutely,
next.
absolutely. I mean, I'm so grateful to the flow space. I mean, I've been here learning so much about menopause because no one prepared me for that. It happened 10 years before it was supposed to happen. I know breasties that are grappling with medical menopause at 21 years old. And so, you know, when you don't know that you can expect a frozen shoulder because no one tells you about it, you don't know, you're figuring it's something wrong with you. Meanwhile, it's supposed to happen and no one has primed you for it.
And can I just say, too, from my perspective as a surgeon, I want my patients to come back and follow up with me. And I find that some of my younger patients, some of them are like, "Oh, I'm done." So I'm like I realize like after a while, I'm like, I don't see them. Like, you're supposed to come back and follow up with me. Like, you know, I mean, I'm happy that you've completed your treatment, but you still need to come see me. And, you know, I find that maybe they don't want to be reminded of the fact that they had breast cancer, but I still want to be sure that you're doing well, and I need to check on you.
It's almost like we need to redefine that bell ringing. It's the milestone. It's not the finish line, and you got more to go. And
Absolutely.
unfortunately, that could be daunting as well, but this is where the community comes in. And how do we redefine it, and how do we make sure that we have proper information, that we're pointing people to the right locations for this information, that we're removing these taboos about what I love you said 40 years ago, we wouldn't have been talking about breast cancer. Let's shout it. Let's start talking about all of these things.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Let's build in that idea of the importance of community, because Trish, this is basically what you do now through your work with the Breasties. And I would love if you could share how important it has been to have that kind of group support, and any advice you could provide to members of the audience who may know someone who is going through an experience that you had, and how they can be supportive as well.
Thanks. We have started saying that community is treatment. And what that means is that, yes, you have family, you have friends, and if you're lucky and you do your recon, you get a great medical team too that's supporting you. But then there's that piece missing, which is like, when I'm having my doom scrolls at 2:00 in the morning, and like, who can relate to me and who can help you feel seen, and who that is going to be people that are going through it with you. And when the parade is over and you're still kind of grappling with the thoughts of maybe it's coming back, these are the folks that are going to give you that space to be like, girl, me too, I thought it the same as well. So community is treatment, and it has informed me in ways when I go to my doctor's appointments and I'm asking my doctor some hard questions, and they look at me like, where did you learn that? Oftentimes it's a breastie, it's a community member who has said that, hey, this is what I've learned, ask your doctor this. So it empowers you in ways that you couldn't imagine by having community.
Yeah, it's incredible to hear what you've learned from your fellow breast cancer survivors. Kristen, I know in the work that you do, you also hear a lot of patient stories. Has there been one that's left a particular impression on you?
There's so many. I always think about Trish, and I go back to that when you said, I think you took his hand. You're like, do you feel that? And I like, oh. And what has just, over the last year, I've heard your story, not from you, but from 5 other women they're still happening, and that is not okay. And or being getting a diagnosis, and at the same time having to figure out, I know you're in your late 20s, but would you like to also freeze your eggs? And we need to have a conversation, and we need to do this immediately. So is that a yes or no? This person was just dating someone they don't know. Or like, how do you have that conversation? Like, I may have had breast cancer. Do you see this relationship going forward? Should I freeze my eggs with you or not? So I think it's the side stories of the breast cancer diagnosis that we need to have conversations about and lift those stories up, because to your point, community is treatment, and the more we talk about it, the more that we're able to say, that's me. That's what I went through. Help me through this right now. When I'm doom scrolling, help me get through it.
Dr. Joseph, what about you? I know you've seen hundreds, thousands probably of patients. Was there one who taught you a particular lesson that impacted, kind of how you went on to care for other breast cancer patients?
Yeah, I mean, same thing. I have so many. They all teach me something and kind of keep me grounded in what's important in life. But I had a patient that I took care of during the pandemic. Always, no matter what she was going through, just had a smile on her face. I mean, like my PA and I would also say, she's always smiling. Like, hair loss, no problem. She was like, how you doing, Dr. Joseph? I'm like, how are you doing? That's what I wanted to say. Like, I'm fine. How are you doing? And I found out later on that after she completed her treatment, she was going through this all by herself in New York. Her family was in the Midwest with the pandemic. They couldn't come to New York, and hadn't seen her mother, her sister, her whole family. She had moved here, was working as a waitress while she was in work, starving artist kind of story. And it was just incredible, the resilience she had, just going through something like this and still finding a way to just find the joy by, she was posting things on Instagram and getting all these, I was just so amazed at the way she found joy in doing her artwork and just, and she just never complained. I mean, I'm like, why am I complaining about these little things in my life, like traffic or things like that? I mean, she was going through cancer treatment. She would have these project runways with her gowns when she was going through radiation treatment. And so she would post these on Instagram. So every time she went for radiation treatment, she would take the gowns and somehow made a new gown out of it, even with something on her head and something. It was really cute. I mean, like, that's the thing. That was the kind of person she was. And I would then I started following her on Instagram. And so I was like, I wanted to see what she was going to do next with her gowns. So it just reminded me, like, you can, that making lemonade out of lemons, that's what she did. And it just taught me to, you never know what someone's going through.
Yeah.
When you see someone.
And obviously so many different ways that people cope with this kind of devastating news. Trish, I'm wondering if you could go back to that moment when you got the phone call saying that you had stage 3 cancer. Is there anything that you wish you had known already in that moment that you would like other people to know if they are ever in that position to get that phone call that obviously no one ever wants to get? But if that phone call comes to you, is there any advice you have about how you kind of cope with that and move forward?
That's wow. A loss for words. I think that there's different ways to go through it. There's Project Runway things, and there's falling into deep depression. I took to my bed for several days and could not think, eat, drink, anything. I just thought my life was over. But I decided to get up, and I think that finding your people will help you to put that one foot in front of the other. That really was what changed it for me, and that's what I want to maybe share with others too. Is that finding your people? I say finding your people, finding your community, and finding your voice. I will never, I get the ick when I'm so grateful to cancer. I'm like, wow, that's not my jam to say that kind of stuff, but I do feel that I'm living the life that I was destined to live. If I went through cancer and I had to fight for my life and check people, then I cannot live a small life now. And I think that's what I can tell folks that go through this is this is your cancer card. This is your permission to take up space and be the boss bitch that you were meant to be. Sorry, you told me I could.
I love that you did still have that moment of thinking your life is over, because I think so many women experience that kind of immediate, oh my gosh, this is it. And Kristen, we were talking backstage, and And that's not really true to the degree it once was, that there's been incredible progress made, and that breast cancer is probably more beatable than ever. Can you talk a little bit about what we have seen in terms of just advancements?
Absolutely. And again, I go back to what we started. There's a lot of advancement and there's a lot of information. We've seen, from a variety of different treatment options to diagnostics to, I think even you guys were covering, mammograms are changing, and then policy change as well. So all of that is going in a rapid pace in the right direction. It's not all doom and gloom. There are great things happening in the future to look at treatment options and experience and how does one want to go through. What I love is that there's no right way to go through breast cancer. And that's really up to each individual person and how they want to experience it, their treatment option, that they make a decision with their doctor, continuing to follow up with their doctor. I'd say most important is, and we heard it today, you got to prioritize your health. The most important thing that we have to do, right? We have to prioritize our health. You mentioned 1 in 8 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer. They'll go through treatment options. If they've gone through, a regimen, 1 in 3 of those women could have a recurrence in the future. And when it's recurred, it could recur to metastatic. That's not okay. We have to do something about that. So having those earlier screenings, making sure that you're checking in with your health, absolutely super critical.
Dr. Joseph, what have been some of the biggest breakthroughs you've seen just in the last couple of years in terms of treatment of the disease?
Oh, wow. I think just even in the past couple of years, we're seeing more targeted therapies for breast cancer. When I first started, I'm dating myself.
It's a safe space.
Yeah, safe space. We're all excited about the tamoxifen and the AIs and so forth. But now we have more targeted therapies beyond chemotherapy. So now we're looking at the signature of the tumors and looking at how they express themselves. So it's not like a one size fits all. So that's great. And even just the way we as surgeons are treating, doing the surgery. So not every tumors that we thought we would ultimately have to do mastectomies on, we can do the oncoplastic surgeries and maybe spare some women from having a mastectomy, and the type of reconstructions that we're offering. So the type of radiation treatments that we're doing now. We can do shorter courses of radiation. So it is not, as we were just saying before, it's not your mother's breast cancer anymore. And so a lot of women get scared, like, oh, I knew someone that had breast cancer and they had a horrible course and it was terrible. I'm like, well, how long ago was that? Oh, that was 1985. And I was like, okay, it's like 2024 and things have changed. And I try to reassure them that it's not as bad as it used to be, and we have different treatments.
Amazing. I love that there's hope in women's
Yes.
health, and very inspiring. We're going to open it up to audience questions in just a moment. Caitlin, can you wave? Caitlin's going to run around with a microphone, so if you have a question, flag her over. But one final question for each of you. I'd like for you to imagine that we are here a year from now. It is, again, the end of October. We're talking about breast cancer. What exciting new thing do you hope we are able to say about breast cancer 1 year from now? I'll start with you, Kristen.
We've reduced the death rate, that we've made a significant dent in the overall death rate of women dying from breast cancer.
Amazing. I really hope that comes true. Trish?
I would say that the money towards research, I think, especially stage 4 research, that there's just so little funding. So I would love to see that there's more money raised and more attention and more space made for those who are thrivers in our community, because so often they felt shame and disregarded in our space. So I would love to see that.
We've closed the mortality gap between Black and white women who die from breast cancer. We still have this persistent mortality gap, and so we need to close that.
Well, these are incredible things to aspire to and hope for, and I really look forward to being able to say all of this from our stage next year.